I stood near the gate, watching Daniel disappear down the jet bridge, his black carry-on in tow. The airport buzzed around us, travelers hustling with rolling suitcases, the low hum of announcements echoing across the concourse. Jasper clutched my hand with unusual firmness, his small face pale and serious. "Grandma, we have to go," he whispered, barely audible over the background noise. I blinked at him, caught between amusement and confusion. "What are you talking about, Jasper?" I asked, kneeling slightly to meet his wide, earnest eyes. He tugged gently, urging me toward the exit. His voice trembled, but the determination in it was unmistakable. "He's gone. We must leave." My heart skipped a beat. Daniel had simply boarded a plane for a business trip. Nothing more. And yet, the way Jasper gripped my hand, the intensity in his gaze, sent a shiver down my spine. Something about his tone carried a weight far beyond his years. I glanced around the crowded terminal, feeling the normal airport chaos as a distant blur, as if a thin line of tension had separated us from the rest of the world. My instincts, honed by decades of teaching and raising a family, nudged me to listen. Children rarely cried wolf in moments like this. I adjusted the strap of my handbag and nodded to Jasper, following his lead as he guided me toward the main corridor. Whatever he sensed, I knew it demanded attention, and so we began moving, careful but purposeful, leaving the gate and the familiar behind as the airport carried on around us. Jasper led me through the terminal, his little hand clutching mine tightly. I kept my pace casual, careful not to draw attention, all the while scanning the crowd with a growing sense of unease. That's when I noticed them two men in dark suits near the security checkpoint. Their posture was deliberate, their eyes fixed in our direction. They didn't move aggressively, but the way they subtly adjusted their positions whenever we shifted caught my attention immediately. I forced myself to breathe evenly, reminding Jasper to walk normally, keeping a soft grip on his hand. My mind raced through every scenario I'd ever read about or watched in movies, trying to parse what could be real and what might be a child's imagination. Yet, every instinct in me, the years of teaching, the hours spent analyzing human behavior, the countless times I'd raised a family, told me something was off. We veered toward the exit, moving through the throng of travelers with measured steps. I kept an eye on the men, noting their movements without making it obvious. They mirrored our general direction, not blatantly, but with enough precision to make me certain we weren't just being paranoid. Jasper squeezed my hand again, his small knuckles white. "Grandma," he whispered. "They're still there." His voice was low, urgent, and I realized that what he felt wasn't just a child's unease, it was a trained caution, instilled by his father for situations exactly like this. I adjusted my bag on my shoulder and led us toward the parking garage, weaving through the crowds with a careful rhythm. Every step was deliberate, every turn calculated. I had to get us out without alerting them to our awareness, and as we approached the sliding doors leading to the outside, I braced myself for what might come next. Once we reached the safety of the parking garage, I paused near the elevator, letting the noise of the terminal fade behind us. Jasper held Mr. Carrots tightly to his chest, his small eyes darting toward the shadowed corners. "Grandma," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Dad said I should give you this." I raised an eyebrow, puzzled. "Give me what?" "Sweetheart." He hesitated, then carefully unzipped a hidden seam along the rabbit's back. Inside was a small USB drive wrapped in a folded note. My pulse quickened as I took them from him. The weight of the moment pressed down, a gravity far beyond anything a child his age should understand. I unfolded the note, recognizing Daniel's neat handwriting immediately. It instructed me to take the USB somewhere safe and avoid using phones or credit cards. He had anticipated surveillance. The contents, it hinted, contained evidence that could expose wrongdoing serious enough to endanger our family. Jasper watched me closely, waiting for acknowledgement. He said only you should see it first. Grandma, he added. I nodded, feeling the responsibility settle over me like a physical burden. Every instinct told me this was more than corporate misdeeds. Daniel had gone to lengths I had never imagined, enough to put both Jasper and me in potential danger. I slipped the USB and note into the inner pocket of my handbag. Glancing around the garage, the air seemed heavier, each distant sound sharper. Jasper tugged my hand gently, his small grip reminding me that we weren't just carrying evidence, we were safeguarding his life as well. I took a deep breath, forcing my thoughts to clarity. We needed to move, and we needed to move carefully. One misstep could alert whoever had been tracking us. With a final glance at the open parking rows, I nodded to Jasper and started toward the car. Each step measured, knowing the next choices we made could determine everything. I slipped into the driver's seat, starting the engine with deliberate calm. Jasper climbed in beside me, still clutching Mr. Carrots, eyes wide but steady. I kept my movements casual, adjusting the rearview mirror to glance at the rows of cars behind us. The dark SUV I had noticed in the garage slid into traffic a few cars back, matching our every turn with a precision that set my nerves on edge. I exhaled slowly and reminded myself that panic would only make mistakes more likely. I maneuvered through the airport exits and onto the city streets, taking back roads and smaller avenues, weaving between familiar landmarks and industrial zones. I avoided major arteries where cameras or crowds could compromise our movement. Every turn, every lane change was a calculated risk, designed to break the SUV's rhythm without drawing attention from other drivers. Jasper leaned against my shoulder, whispering, "Grandma, are they still behind us?" I gave a small, reassuring smile, but my eyes never left the mirror. Yes, they were still there, and their persistence confirmed what I feared. This wasn't a random observation. Someone wanted us contained, tracked, or worse. We reached a narrow overpass where traffic momentarily slowed. I accelerated subtly, weaving through the cars ahead, forcing the SUV to hesitate for a moment. A flicker of satisfaction passed through me, enough to know they weren't infallible. But the sense of relief was brief. The SUV regained pace quickly, and I realized our window of advantage was shrinking. I reminded Jasper of our plan. Keep calm, don't draw attention, and trust my decisions. Each instinct I had honed as a teacher, raising a family and navigating a lifetime of responsibilities, became tools for survival. I treated the streets like a chessboard, anticipating their moves and countering with small, deliberate maneuvers. We slipped into a quieter industrial district, the SUV still trailing but slightly less certain. I adjusted my next turn, a sequence meant to confuse and delay, buying us precious minutes. Jasper's small hand pressed briefly against mine, grounding me. With a steady rhythm and eyes sharp on the road, we continued forward, navigating the maze of city streets toward a temporary sanctuary where I could regroup. We finally reached the quiet apartment of an old friend, a former student who had trusted me enough to provide a temporary refuge. I closed the door behind us, bolting it and turning to Jasper. His wide eyes followed my every movement, but he stayed silent, sensing the seriousness of the moment. I motioned for him to set Mr. Carrots aside and step close, keeping him within arm's reach. I retrieved the USB from the stuffed rabbit, examining it in my hand as if its weight could tell me what dangers lay ahead. Every instinct in me screamed caution, but there was no time to hesitate. I opened my laptop, connecting the drive, and stared at the screen as the files began to populate. Folders of spreadsheets, emails, and scanned documents lined the interface, each name and number hinting at something bigger, something I could barely comprehend at first glance. Slowly, the picture emerged. Daniel had uncovered layers of financial corruption that extended far beyond the firm he worked for. Transactions funneled through shell companies, offshore accounts tied to organizations I had only seen referenced in news reports, and evidence of illegal arms deals disguised as legitimate investments. My chest tightened as I scrolled, realizing the scale this was not a minor scandal. People with power, influence, and resources were implicated. Jasper leaned against my side, his small voice asking if we were in trouble. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. We are, sweetheart, but we have to be careful and do the right thing. I saw the trust in his eyes and felt the weight of responsibility settle on me like a physical force. Protecting him was only part of it. Delivering this evidence safely could prevent countless other people from being harmed. I reviewed Daniel's accompanying note. Instructions on how to handle the information, where to go, and who could be trusted. Surveillance, tracking, and potential threats were all accounted for in his careful planning. My mind raced, calculating routes, contacts, and contingencies. Every choice now mattered. Hesitation could be deadly. I closed the laptop briefly to look at Jasper, nodding to reassure him. The fear in his young face mirrored the gravity I felt inside, yet it also reminded me why we couldn't falter. Courage was required, but so was precision. I packed the USB securely back into my handbag, slipping it into an inner pocket for safekeeping, and adjusted our plan for immediate movement. With determination settling over me, I guided Jasper toward the door, each step deliberate, knowing that leaving safely was only the beginning of what we were about to face. We slipped out of the apartment just as the city began to shift toward evening. I kept Jasper close, his small hand tucked firmly in mine as we navigated the quieter streets of the Chicago suburbs. My plan was simple: avoid main roads, minimize exposure, and reach a trusted contact who could provide temporary shelter and guidance. Every turn I made was calculated, every glance in the rearview mirror alert for signs of pursuit. Our first stop was a small townhouse owned by a former student, someone I had mentored years ago and trusted implicitly. She met us at the door, her expression instantly recognizing the gravity of our arrival. She didn't ask questions beyond what was necessary. Without hesitation, she ushered us inside, providing a small room for Jasper and me to settle, along with a modest meal to keep our strength up. While Jasper unpacked Mr. Bite carrots and arranged a few personal items, I spoke briefly with my contact, reviewing the next steps. She had connections: another former student working at a local taxi company, a friend with a private vehicle, and a journalist I could reach discreetly. Every person in this network was someone I had personally vouched for. But even with familiarity, the uncertainty lingered. Could I trust that none of them were compromised? I arranged our transport for the next leg of the journey. The driver would take us through secondary streets, avoiding cameras and high-traffic areas, while I maintained constant awareness of our surroundings. Jasper, perceptive despite his age, noticed my tension and whispered, "Grandma, do you think they'll catch us?" I smiled faintly, squeezing his hand. "We'll be careful. That's all we can do for now." By the time we left, the sun had dipped behind the skyline, casting long shadows over the familiar streets that now felt threatening. Every movement, every choice mattered, and yet the trust I placed in these allies was our only lifeline. We settled into the car, ready to continue toward the next safe location, our hearts steady but alert, fully aware that danger could appear at any moment. The drive north stretched longer than I had anticipated, the highways giving way to winding roads flanked by dense forests. Darkness settled over the landscape as we approached the secluded cabin Daniel had recommended. Its location, remote yet accessible, promised a temporary reprieve from the chaos of the city. Jasper pressed close as I parked the car on the narrow dirt path leading to the cabin. He clutched Mr. Carrots against his chest, his small body tense but trusting. I opened the door and led him inside, quietly surveying the space. It was modest, just enough for the two of us to rest, but it offered the security we desperately needed. I set our bags down and guided Jasper to a small corner of the main room where he could arrange his belongings. He worked silently, occasionally glancing at me with wide eyes. "Grandma, will they find us here?" he asked softly. I crouched to his level, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "We're safe for now. Sweetheart, we'll be careful, and we'll follow the plan exactly." That's how we stay ahead. Even as I spoke, a tight knot formed in my stomach. Every instinct screamed that this safety was temporary. The forest outside, normally serene, now felt like a wall separating us from a world that could reach us at any moment. Yet seeing Jasper settle, his small hands arranging Mr. Carrots and his few possessions, offered a measure of calm. I began reviewing the USB and Daniel's note in my mind, planning the next steps while ensuring Jasper felt secure. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on me, not just for the evidence we carried, but for the child who trusted me entirely. We moved quietly through the cabin, establishing routines and preparing for the night. Outside, the trees whispered in the wind, and inside, I whispered assurances to Jasper as he finally relaxed against my side. We had reached the cabin, and for the first time in hours, a fragile sense of calm settled over us. Though the road ahead remained uncertain, the knock at the cabin door startled both Jasper and me. I moved quickly to open it, revealing Rachel, Daniel's ex-wife and Jasper's mother. Her travel-worn face and guarded expression told me she had crossed miles under difficult circumstances. She stepped inside, carrying a small bag, and immediately crouched to hug Jasper, who buried his face against her shoulder. I closed the door behind her, then led them to the small table. Once Jasper settled with Mr. Carrots, Rachel spoke in a low, urgent tone. She explained that Daniel had uncovered corruption far beyond their firm, illegal weapons transactions, offshore accounts tied to global organizations, and high-ranking officials who had everything to lose if the truth came out. Every detail she shared deepened the sense of danger, each revelation heavier than the last. I listened carefully, balancing the fear curling in my stomach with the need to remain composed for Jasper. His presence reminded me why courage was essential. I could not allow panic to take over. We needed clarity to navigate the threats. Rachel outlined the precautions Daniel had arranged, the allies we could trust, and the steps for delivering the evidence safely to the press. Each piece of information confirmed my growing suspicion. The scale of the danger was larger than we had imagined. Whoever pursued us had far-reaching resources, and any mistake could have catastrophic consequences. I glanced at Jasper as he listened quietly, understanding more than his years should allow. The weight of responsibility pressed on me, protecting him, safeguarding Daniel's work, and surviving the peril now surrounding us. With plans outlined and roles assigned, I took a deep breath, knowing the next steps would require precision and courage, and that the journey was far from over. Night had fully descended by the time we left the cabin, and the forest swallowed the narrow dirt road in darkness. I adjusted the red-filtered headlamp on my forehead, keeping the light low to avoid attracting attention, while Jasper stayed close, his small backpack snug on his shoulders. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl seemed amplified, warning us of potential watchers. I led the way along the faint trail Daniel had marked, relying on my memory of his instructions and my own knowledge of the terrain. Jasper's small hand rested in mine, steady. Despite the long hours and unfamiliar path, he whispered questions now and then, but I answered only enough to keep him reassured while maintaining focus on our surroundings. The trail became more uneven as we moved deeper into the woods, roots and rocks forcing careful steps. I signaled to Jasper to follow precisely, keeping pace with me and avoiding sudden movements. One misstep could leave a sound that carried, revealing our position to anyone pursuing us. My mind calculated every turn, every potential vantage point from which someone might observe, and adjusted our path accordingly. Hours seemed to stretch indefinitely, but we moved steadily. When we reached a small clearing, I paused to let Jasper sip water and adjust his pack. The moonlight offered faint guidance, but it also revealed our silhouette against the tree line. I remained vigilant, scanning the surrounding forest as I guided him onward. The journey tested both of us, his courage, my resourcefulness, but each step brought us closer to safety. I kept reminding myself of Daniel's trust, of the evidence we carried, and of the importance of keeping Jasper unharmed. Finally, the tree line gave way to a narrow gravel road, faintly visible in the moonlight. We were approaching the next phase of the plan, where temporary safety awaited and the city's shadow would no longer press against us. The early morning light filtered through the trees as we reached the edge of the property Daniel had arranged. The safe house was modest but secure, tucked away behind a line of evergreens and a gravel driveway that disappeared into the surrounding landscape. I guided Jasper down from the vehicle, his small hand still in mine, and we approached the front door with cautious optimism. Inside, the space was clean, organized, and ready for our arrival. A few essentials had been stocked in advance: food, blankets, and basic supplies for both of us. Jasper immediately set down his backpack and hugged Mr. Carrots, his small sense of security restored. I watched him carefully, the weight of responsibility pressing on me in a way that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. I set our bags aside and began reviewing the plan for the coming days, thinking through Daniel's instructions, our contacts, and the evidence we carried. For the first time since the airport, I felt a measure of control. I was no longer just reacting, I was directing our actions, ensuring Jasper's safety while honoring Daniel's trust. The isolation allowed me to reflect on the courage and resilience I hadn't realized I possessed. Every decision, every calculated risk had been a step toward leadership, not just for myself, but for Jasper. I could feel the growth within me, the shift from fearful guardian to determined protector capable of facing the unknown. Even as we settled in, I remained aware of the potential threats lingering beyond the property. The danger was diminished, but not gone. We had achieved temporary safety, but the world beyond these walls remained unpredictable, a reminder that vigilance would be required at every step. As I closed the door behind me and looked at Jasper, arranging his small corner of the room, I understood that this was both an ending and a beginning. The next stage of our journey awaited, one that demanded patience, courage, and careful planning.